Rick and Morty are bad people, but that's okay. Welcome back to Nerdist News, I'm Dan Casey, and today we're breaking down the latest episode of Rick and Morty. Season 7's 6th episode, Rickfending Your Mort, not only shows us who watches The Watchmen, but who watches the people who are watching The Watchmen. It's just convoluted, I know. It's a cosmic clip show full of hilarious parodies, preposterous characters, and some tough pills to swallow about the lies we tell ourselves to make it through everyday life. And in the wake of last week's bombshell showdown between Rick Prime and Rick C-137, it's a very necessary reset. We're gonna break it all down for you in just a moment, but to do so we have to spoil what happens in the latest Rick and Morty. So if you haven't seen it yet and you're worried about that sort of thing, leave now before you see something you probably shouldn't.
Very well. Bear witness to 9/11.
No! Dude, don't. Just, you need to let us through to this stuff, okay?
Okay, let's get into it, shall we? In the wake of Unmort Rickin', Rick is unmoored. He quite literally doesn't know what to do with himself after murdering his arch nemesis. It was exemplified by his 1,000-yard stare and prevailing sense of shell shock as he struggled to readjust to normal life in the end of last week's episode. But much like Mr. Poopy Butthole during the Season 7 premiere, Rick chooses to embrace oblivion and drink his body weight in beer rather than do the difficult thing and move forward. He doesn't want to go on adventures with Morty, his workbench is bereft of any kooky inventions, he's just surrounded by a graveyard of dead soldiers.
Adventures? Remember those?
Oh, yeah, not right now, Morty. Definitely next week, though.
The episode Rickfending Your Mort is named for the 1991 Albert Brooks dramedy Defending Your Life, in which an advertising exec is forced to stand trial in the afterlife to quite literally defend his life, and to see if his choices merit a shot at reincarnation.
At this time, I'd like to present a compilation of general misjudgments. Half of them fear-based, half of them just stupid.
Here the premise is quite similar. Rick calls in a cosmic audit to see what actually qualifies as an adventure, at least according to Morty's specious list of stamp cards.
Bam! Freedom and weep! Fully punch cards, each entitling me to an adventure of my choosing.
And to be fair, Morty's naming conventions do raise some eyebrows. Things like Zorbulok's Death Race, sure, sounds like an adventure. But Regional Plumbing Convention and getting good at yo-yo tricks don't exactly pass muster. Instead of heavenly bureaucrats, though, we get The Observer, a gigantic floating geode hilariously voiced by executive producer and series writer Albro Lundy.
Oh, I'm here for this.
The Observer is based on the Guardian of Forever from Star Trek the original series.
As correct as possible for you. Your science knowledge is obviously primitive.
But this floaty boy is obnoxious, petty, and omniscient, which has to be the worst combo of adjectives for someone who can show you your most embarrassing moments at the drop of a hat.
This is our target, Dichotomous Daniel.
That was my chair. It was a fart.
What follows is a hilarious twist on the classic clip show format that honestly had me cackling in my living room. Much like Morty's Mind Blowers, this was much more effective than returning to interdimensional cable yet again, because it turned out that sometimes thoughtfully writing out hilarious vignettes is better than improvised rantings and ravings. Except for Two Brothers. They rule.
Two brothers.
After a delightful series of riffs about everything from Breath of the Wild, Labyrinth, Blade, Pet Sematary, and more, we're left to interrogate the episode's central question. Do our professed morals match our actions? Are we actually good people? If you asked Rick and Morty at the outset of this episode, they would say yes.
Look, sure, we can be irreverent, but we're far from evil. We make more friends than enemies.
Let's run the tape on that one.
But as we've seen, their adventures leave death, destruction, and some terrifying new villains in their wake. Now, I'm not saying that Churi's gonna be the new Rick Prime or Evil Morty, but an immortal churro that was left to die on a fake churro planet who somehow made his way back to Earth to exact vengeance and psychologically torture Morty is a force to be reckoned with.
As you left me on a barren planet, praying for death!
The idea they're not good people is a tough pill for Rick and Morty to swallow, but it's also proof why platonic ideals are something to strive for. They're inherently not achievable because nobody is perfect, especially not Rick and Morty. I mean, just look at how many guns they went through.
I thought it would turn him into a gorilla.
Why would you want a bully to be a gorilla?
As humans, we are selfish, self-interested, egotistical, and oftentimes unwilling to be meaningfully introspective. And apparently that extends even to seemingly impartial cosmic observers who it turns out are not impartial at all.
I'll give you guys $20 to fight each other.
Money, money.
They're basically huge assholes just like us, except they can see everything and prefer to weaponize that information to shape their own narratives. Now, at first, the episode feels like a necessary tonal reset after the heaviness of last week, but it makes perfect sense in the overarching story of this season. Rick and Morty is a show that spent so much time over the course of its run, and especially this season, dealing with introspection, identity, and interrogating one's own motives. We've seen how avoidance can enable self-destructive behaviors and how Poopy got his poop back. A deep rumination on the concept of self in the Jarek trap, how isolation and misdirected anger only serve to deepen emotional divides in Air Force Wong, and how revenge is an ultimately hollow pursuit in Mort Rickon. Now, in Rickfending Your Mort, they're once again putting our heroes' insecurities under the microscope by seeing if the lies we tell ourselves on a day-to-day basis really holds up to scrutiny.
He came back evil. What do you think will happen if we bury him again?
You don't know?
While the evidence against Rick and Morty is fairly damning, Rick turning the tables on the observer shows that having this idealized version of who we are is a coping mechanism inherent to all of us. Some people out there, like Rick Prime or Jeffrey Dahmer, are inherently evil. That's why he comes out of the gun that shoots bad people.
Jeffrey Dahmer? Hi.
What's happening?
I don't know, just run!
Others, like Rick and Morty, usually mean well but wind up doing bad things on occasion.
Let me guess. You went back to the planet, gave some thoughtful insight to their leader, and now they're selling their dead at every space Walmart.
I did, but I didn't say to do this!
As the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and Rick and Morty's good intentions have left a heck of a lot of hell in their wake. But that's not the real takeaway here. While the Observer's court finds Rick and Morty guilty as charged, the standards they're applying are impossible to live up to. Our lives are not defined by our mistakes. Rather, it's how we live with them and how we carry on. While Rick and Morty may wind up doing more harm than good, at least they're trying. Which is more than can be said about the Observers, whose inaction leaves almost as much suffering in their wake. They claim that their inaction is in service of documentation, but they still have the gall to then judge others like Rick and Morty when they are just as guilty themselves.
I regret nothing, Tom. The only thing you could never see was what a treasure Nancy was. I'll kill you! I'd like to observe you try!
And while it's easy to watch other people and hold them in judgment, it's much harder to look inwards and question your own motives, especially when you know it might lead to your own premature death at the hands of a sentient churro. Anyway, folks, there you have it. That's everything you need to know about Rick and Morty Season 7, Episode 6. We'll be back next week with another breakdown for you, but if you want to catch up on the rest of the season, you can watch our previous videos wherever fine Nerdist content is served. For now, though, tell us, what did you think of this episode? Did you spot anything that we missed? Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.